My wife cheated with her boss, and now she's claiming half of our $750, $0 house and $300, $0 in savings. I never suspected she'd betray me for a $25, $0 bonus she was secretly negotiating behind my back. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be a complete liar and cheat. Honestly, I thought we had a pretty good marriage, at least I did. We've been together for 8 years, built a pretty solid life, or so I believed. We had a nice house, worth about $750, $0 in decent savings, roughly $300, $0 tucked away for a rainy day. I worked hard, she worked hard, and we seemed to be headed toward retirement comfortably. But that was all. It turns out I was blind to the signs. It all started subtly. Lisa had been acting a little off for a few months. She'd come home late from work more often, claiming she was staying late or meeting with clients. She'd brush off my questions with her usual bitchy attitude, saying I was paranoid or jealous. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe she was just stressed or overworked. But then I noticed her phone going off constantly. Texts, emails, notifications I couldn't see. She'd always hide her phone when I was around, and if I tried to glance at her screen, she'd snap at me, call me controlling or insecure. One day I decided to check her phone when she went to the grocery store. I figured, what's the harm? I wasn't snooping out of mistrust, just curiosity, but what I found was enough to make my stomach drop. There were messages, flirty, suggestive messages between her and her boss, Mark. They were talking about secret lunch dates, plans to meet after hours, and even some explicit talk. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved, was having an affair with her boss. The messages weren't just innocent flirtation. They were intimate, heated. She was lying about staying late at work for months. I saw photos of her in his office, her hand on his knee, smiling like they had some secret. I saw texts where she called him her escape from the dull routine of our life. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All those nights I was at work, she was with him. They were screwing around and I was completely clueless. I didn't know what to do at first. My mind raced. I felt angry, betrayed, stupid. How could I have missed the signs? I thought we were solid, but the proof was staring me in the face. I couldn't confront her then. I needed a plan. I sat in my office for hours just staring at her messages, trying to process the reality that my wife had been cheating on me and lying about everything. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the betrayal of trust, the manipulation, the way she'd lied to my face for months. The next day, I decided I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I set a trap. I followed her one evening when she said she was working late again. She went to a fancy hotel downtown. I parked a few blocks away, watched her walk in with a bag from a nearby restaurant. When she came out an hour later, I followed her to a parking lot. She got into her car and I saw her meet up with Mark. They kissed, hugged, and then drove off together. That was the moment I knew for sure. My wife was cheating on me with her boss and she didn't even care enough to hide it. I felt numb, honestly. All the trust I had in her was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about everything. The years we spent building this life, the plans we made, the house we bought, the future I thought we were working toward. And now all I could see was her with Mark, lying, sneaking around, betraying me for a bonus she was secretly negotiating behind my back. She was willing to throw everything away for a few $1,000s, something she claimed was just business. Yeah, right. That's when I realized this goes way deeper than just a fling. It's about greed, betrayal, and a complete lack of respect. The next morning, I confronted her. I kept my cool, but inside I was boiling. I told her I knew about the affair. She at first called me paranoid, said I was imagining things, that I was overreacting. She had a million excuses. She was stressed. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything. She even called me insecure and accused me of not trusting her, but I had all the evidence. I threw the phone on the table and told her I'd seen everything. Her face went white. She started crying, but not because she was sorry, more like she was angry that I found out. She said I was overreacting, that Mark was just a business associate, and that it was no big deal. She tried to spin it as some kind of misunderstanding, as if I was jealous for no reason, but I wasn't buying it. It was clear she'd been lying, manipulating, and hiding her affair for months. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this for a stupid bonus? I realized I was done trusting her, and that I'd have to make some serious decisions. That's where I am now. Honestly, I don't know what the future holds. Part of me wants to tear everything apart, take her to court and fight for my share of the house and savings. I know she's claiming half of everything now. A house worth $750, $0 and $300, $0 in savings, because she says she's entitled. She's been bitching nonstop, calling herself the victim, trying to spin it as my fault. But I see through her bullshit. I know her game. This whole thing has left me feeling like I don't even recognize my own life anymore. I trusted her completely, and she threw it all away for a quick thrill with her boss, Mark. I honestly don't know how I get past this, but I do know one thing. I'm not going down without a fight. I'll make sure she pays for this betrayal, even if it kills me. And if she thinks she's walking out with half my house and savings, she's got another thing coming. After I confronted Lisa and saw her fall apart in front of me, I knew I couldn't just let her spin her lies and walk away scot-free. The thing is, I wasn't just angry, I was hurt to my core. The woman I loved, the woman I thought was my partner, was out there screwing her boss behind my back, and she had the nerve to act like I was the one causing trouble. I felt like I'd been punched again and again, each blow worse than the last. I started digging into everything I could find. I hired a lawyer the next day, someone who knew the ins and outs of divorce and property law. I wanted to protect what was mine, especially the house and the savings. I knew Lisa was already planning her next move, probably trying to spin this as some kind of mutual mistake or misunderstanding. But I had proof, screenshots, emails, her hotel receipts. I wasn't going down without a fight. The first thing I did was review our financials. I needed to understand exactly what she was claiming and how much she thought she was owed. She was demanding half of everything, $375, $0 from the house, $150, $0 from the savings, and some alimony on top of that. She kept telling me she deserved it because she was entitled to half of our assets. That's when I realized she was playing the victim, trying to manipulate the situation. But I knew the truth. Her affair was a betrayal, pure and simple, and I wasn't going to let her take everything without a fight. I also started gathering evidence of her financial negotiations. Turns out, she'd been secretly negotiating a bonus with Mark, something around $25, $0, that she'd been hiding from me. She told me she was just doing extra hours, but I found emails where she was discussing how she'd use the money, how she wanted to upgrade her wardrobe, and even how she'd buy herself a new car. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for a while, and that bonus was just the tip of the iceberg. That night I sat her down again. I told her I knew about the bonus, about her plans to take half of everything, and I made it clear that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. She snapped at me, called me paranoid, said I was accusing her of stuff she didn't do. But I had the proof, and I wasn't afraid to use it. I told her I'd call the lawyer and start the process. She yelled at me, called me controlling and jealous, then threw a tantrum saying I was ruining her life. That's when I realized how manipulative she really was. She always played the victim when things didn't go her way. Over the next few days, I got more evidence. I found out she'd been talking to a divorce lawyer herself, trying to figure out her rights, and she'd hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. I wasn't surprised. She always had a way of turning things around and blaming me for everything. But I stayed focused. I knew I had the upper hand because I had the proof. I also made sure to document all her lies, her secret negotiations, and her attempts to manipulate the situation. Meanwhile, Lisa was becoming more and more bitchy. She'd scream at me, accuse me of trying to control her, and claim I was the one cheating or hiding things. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was ruining her life, all while trying to spin her affair as some kind of mistake she'd regretted immediately. Yeah, right. I saw through her. She was just trying to save face, to keep her grip on the house and the money she thought she deserved. I also started thinking about what I'd do if it came to a fight over the house. We had a prenup, thank God I had won, so I knew I'd be protected to some extent, but Lisa wasn't going down without a fight. She was already talking about her rights and what she's owed. I knew she'd try to drag this out, maybe even threaten me with a lawsuit if she thought she could get away with it. That's why I was prepared. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't some pushover. I was ready to go all the way to keep what was mine. One thing I didn't expect was how quickly Lisa started to turn on her own story. She began claiming she was forced into the affair, that Mark was the one who pursued her, and that she was trapped by her job. She told me she was just trying to find herself, and that I was too controlling. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a mix of disgust and pity hearing her spin it that way. It was obvious she was trying to manipulate the situation, to make herself look like the victim so she could keep everything, but I wasn't buying it anymore. So I decided I'd hold my ground. I told her I'd be filing for divorce, that I'd be fighting for my rights, and that I'd be taking her to court if I had to. I made it clear that I wasn't going to let her walk out with half the house and savings just because she threw a tantrum. I even told her I was planning to expose her affair to her boss's wife, let her deal with that fallout. I wanted her to understand that this wasn't just about money, it was about integrity and respect, and she'd lost both in my eyes. At the same time, I was trying to keep my emotions in check. I felt betrayed, furious, and hurt, more than I'd ever felt before. But I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't let her manipulate me into giving her what she wanted just because she was crying or yelling. I had to stay calm, focus on the facts, and prepare for the fight ahead. Because if she thought she could just walk out with my house and my savings after screwing her boss and lying to my face, she was dead wrong. I was going to make sure I got justice. In the days that followed, I threw myself into organizing everything. I made copies of all the evidence, texts, emails, receipts, and kept them in a secure place. I also started talking to my lawyer more seriously. I knew Lisa was trying to spin the story, claiming she was the victim and that I was overreacting, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I wanted to be prepared for whatever she threw at me next. One thing that struck me was how quickly Lisa shifted her tone once she realized I was serious about fighting back. At first, she was bitchy, yelling, calling me controlling and insecure, accusing me of being the one cheating all along. But after I told her I was filing for divorce and taking her to court for the house and savings, she started to panic a little. Suddenly, she was trying to act innocent, claiming she never wanted to hurt me, that it was just a mistake and that she'd do anything to fix things. Yeah, right. I'd seen through her for months now. She also started to manipulate situation with her words. She told mutual friends she was the victim and that I was trying to ruin her life. She even called her boss Mark, trying to turn him against me, saying I was jealous and controlling. I knew she was just trying to get sympathy, but I refused to buy into her game. I had enough proof to bury her if I needed to. In the meantime, I kept my distance, not letting her see how much her betrayal had affected me. I focused on the facts, on building my case. I spoke with the lawyer about how to handle the house, whether to go for full ownership or a fair split. The house was worth around $750, $0, and I knew she was claiming half, but I also knew that our prenup would heavily favor me. Still, I had to be ready for her to try and challenge that. She kept pushing her narrative, trying to make me look like the bad guy. She said she was under so much pressure, that she needed the money, and that her affair with Mark was just a mistake she regretted immediately. She had the audacity to claim she was confused, that she loved me, and that she didn't want to lose everything over a stupid fling. I just shook my head. I knew her well enough now. She was a master manipulator, and I wasn't falling for her lies anymore. One night she confronted me again, this time in a bitchy tone that was almost chilling. She told me she was entitled to half the house and savings because she'd contributed to our life together. She said, "You think you're so smart, but I deserve what's mine." I looked her straight in the eyes and told her she was full of shit. I reminded her that she'd been cheating behind my back, lying and secretly negotiating her bonus. I told her she was the one who'd betrayed our vows and that I wasn't going to let her walk out with everything just because she threw a tantrum. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she spat back that I was just jealous and trying to control her. I felt rage boiling up, but I kept my voice steady. I knew I had the upper hand now. She was trying to manipulate me into giving her what she wanted, but I was prepared to fight for every penny, every piece of property. I knew she was counting on her charm and her lies to get her way, but I refused to be played. Meanwhile, I also started looking into her financial ties with Mark. I knew they'd been discussing some kind of payout, her bonus, her escape fund, and I wanted to know if she'd been planning this for a while. I found emails where she was negotiating with Mark about her performance, her role, and how she'd be rewarded. It all pointed to her being more calculated than I thought. She wasn't just some innocent wife caught in a mistake. She was actively scheming behind my back. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that I was dealing with someone who had no loyalty, no respect, and no shame. She lied, cheated, and manipulated her way through our marriage, all for a few $1,000s and some ego boost. I was furious at myself for not seeing it sooner, but I also knew I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. One night I decided to call her bluff. I told her I was going to serve her with divorce papers, that I was going to fight her for the house and savings, and that I had enough proof to back me up. I warned her that if she kept pushing, I'd also report her affair to her boss's wife, let her deal with the fallout. I saw her panic for a second, then she quickly masked it with anger. She spat that I was trying to ruin her life. But I just told her to think about what she really wanted, because I was ready to take everything she thought she could get. I knew I had to stay strong because this was only the beginning. Lisa was a bitchy, manipulative woman who thought she could walk all over me, but I was done playing nice. I'd fight for my rights, my house, my savings, and my dignity. I'd be damned if she took everything just because she was a selfish, lying bitch. The game was on, and I was ready to win. The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lisa's attitude shifted from bitchy defiance to outright panic, but she still tried the manipulative angle, insisting she was the victim and that I was just trying to control her. Honestly, I'd had enough of her lies. Every time she opened her mouth, I saw right through her. I knew her game now. She was desperate to keep the house, the savings, and her image, but I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way out of this. I kept pushing forward with my plan. I met with my lawyer again, going over every detail, every possible move Lisa might make. I wanted to be fully prepared for a legal battle. I knew she'd try to claim she deserved half of everything because she contributed to the house, and because she had some kind of right to the savings. But I had the prenup, I had the evidence, and I had legal advice telling me how to protect my assets. I was ready to fight tooth and nail. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior became more bitchy and entitled. She'd throw fits over the smallest things, like me asking her to hand over her phone or stay out of the house. She'd scream, call me controlling, accuse me of trying to ruin her life, and then cry. Crocodile tears trying to make me feel guilty. But I was done feeling guilty. Every time she played the victim, I saw her true face, manipulative, selfish, and deceitful. One day, she tried to guilt me into backing down. She told me she deserved the house because she had sacrificed so much. Yet all I saw was her sneaking around, lying and negotiating behind my back. I told her flat out that she'd betrayed me and that I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. I reminded her that she'd been having an affair with Mark, that she'd been secretly negotiating her bonus, and that her claims to contribute to the house were nothing compared to the damage she'd done. She looked furious, then turned to her usual tactic, playing the victim. She said I was trying to punish her, that I was jealous, and that I was ruining her life. I just shook my head. I knew her game. I'd seen her manipulate everyone around her, and I wasn't falling for it anymore. I told her that if she kept pushing, I'd be forced to take this to court and fight for my rights. I was prepared to do whatever it took to keep what was legally mine. The real shocker came when I found more proof of her negotiations with Mark. There were emails where she discussed her bonus, how she was going to upgrade her lifestyle, and even plans to leave everything behind. She was planning her escape for months, and I was just too blind to see it. That's when I realized she'd been lying to me from the start, pretending everything was fine while she plotted her own future with her boss. I also started to think about how to handle the house. It was worth a lot, about $750, $0, and she was claiming half, of course. But I knew the prenup would favor me, especially since she'd been unfaithful and secretly negotiating her bonus. Still, I had to be strategic. I didn't want a messy legal battle that would drain everything I had. I wanted to settle it quickly and fairly, or as fairly as possible given her lies and manipulations. I warned her that I was prepared to go to court if necessary. I told her I fight for full ownership of the house, and I'd also pursue her for the money she secretly negotiated, including that bonus she was so eager to get her hands on. Her face twisted when I said that. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She started to realize I had enough dirt on her to make her regret ever crossing me. At one point, she tried to turn the tables, saying I was trying to ruin her reputation and that I was controlling everything. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her that her actions had already done that. She was the one who cheated, lied, and manipulated her way into this mess. She was the one who betrayed everything we built. If she thought she could walk out with half the house and the savings just because she threw a tantrum, she was dead wrong. I also started thinking about the bigger picture. I realized that I'd been giving her the benefit of the doubt for too long, thinking she was just stressed or overwhelmed. But now I saw her for what she truly was, a selfish, manipulative woman who'd do anything for money and ego. I knew I had to stand firm, not let her push me around and make her pay for the damage she'd done. That night I sat down and wrote out a clear plan. I would serve her with divorce papers, seek full custody of the house, and fight for my fair share of the savings. I'd also make sure to expose her affair publicly if I had to, especially since her boss Mark was involved. I was sick of her lying and cheating and hiding behind her bitchy attitude. She thought she could get away with it because she was the wife. But I was determined to turn the tables and come out on top. I knew this was only the beginning, but I also knew I wasn't going to fold. Lisa had played her hand, and now I was ready to play mine. I'd fight for what's rightfully mine, my house, my savings, my dignity, and I'd make sure she paid for her betrayal. No matter how bitchy or manipulative she got, I was done backing down. This was war, and I was prepared to win. The legal process moved faster than I expected once I made it clear I was serious. My lawyer drafted the divorce papers, and I handed them over to Lisa with a calm but firm message. This was happening, and she wouldn't walk away with my house or my savings without a fight. Her reaction was classic. She threw a fit, screaming that I was ruining her life, calling me controlling and jealous, like I hadn't already seen through all her lies. But I wasn't about to back down now. I'd already gathered enough evidence to prove her infidelity, her secret negotiations, and her manipulative tactics. She tried to spin it that I was the real problem, that I was trying to punish her, but I just stared at her and said, "You betrayed me, Lisa. You lied, cheated, and manipulated your way into this mess. I'm not the one ruining our marriage. You did that all by yourself." Her bitchy attitude only intensified, and she started crying crocodile tears, claiming she was sorry and that she loved me, but I knew better. That was just her way of trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty so I'd back off. Meanwhile, I kept my focus on the facts. I made sure that my lawyer was preparing all the necessary documents to fight for the house and the savings. I knew the prenup would work in my favor, but Lisa was already trying to claim she contributed equally, despite her betrayal. I'd seen the emails, the hotel receipts, her secret negotiations with Mark. I had enough to prove she was planning her escape for months, and that she'd been dishonest about her intentions from the start. I also started to get serious about exposing her affair. I knew her boss Mark was a key player in all this. I had evidence of their secret meetings, their texts, and even some photos of her sneaking into that hotel. I wasn't planning to just settle quietly. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. I knew her reputation and her career could be at stake if I released everything, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. She'd betrayed me, and I was ready to make sure she paid a price. One night, she confronted me again, this time in a more aggressive tone. She accused me of trying to destroy her, saying I was jealous and controlling. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "You're the one who cheated. You're the one who lied and manipulated. I'm just fighting to protect what's mine." That shut her up for a moment, but then she started crying again, trying to guilt me into backing down. I just shook my head. I'd heard enough of her manipulative bullshit. She kept insisting she deserved half of everything because she'd contributed to our life together. I reminded her that her contribution was built on lies. She'd been unfaithful, secretly negotiating her bonus, and planning her exit for months. I told her that her contribution didn't give her the right to steal my house or my savings. I was prepared to fight for every penny, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. The more she pushed, the more I realized how much she'd been counting on her bitchy attitude and her lies to get her way. But I was done with her games. I told her I'd see her in court if she kept pushing, and I'd fight to the very end to keep what's mine. I also warned her that I'd be exposing her affair to her boss's wife, if necessary, because I wasn't going to let her destroy everything we had built without consequences. Throughout all this, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief because I finally saw her for what she truly was, an unfaithful, manipulative woman who'd betrayed everything. And anger because I'd wasted so much time trusting her, believing we had a real partnership. Now I knew I had to rebuild, and that meant fighting hard, standing my ground and not letting her take what's rightfully mine. The legal battle was just starting, but I was already prepared. I knew Lisa's bitchy, entitled attitude would only get worse as she realized she was losing control. But I wasn't backing down. I'd made my decision. I was fighting for my house, my savings, and my dignity. And I was going to make sure she paid for her betrayal, no matter how much she tried to manipulate or cry her way out of it. Because at the end of the day, I knew what was real, and I knew I deserved better than a wife who cheated with her boss and then tried to steal everything I had. The court date finally came, and I'll never forget the feeling of walking into that courtroom knowing I had everything lined up, proof of her affair, the emails, the hotel receipts, and all the evidence of her secret negotiations. Lisa showed up looking bitchy and defiant, trying to act like she was the victim still, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew she was cornered, and her usual manipulative attitude wasn't going to save her now. My lawyer laid out the case clearly. We proved that Lisa had been unfaithful, that she'd been secretly negotiating her bonus, and that her claims to contribute equally to the house were unfounded. The prenup was solid, and I had enough evidence to show she was trying to manipulate the situation for her own gain. When the judge asked her if she had anything to say, she sputtered, trying to come up with some excuse, but nothing stuck. She looked defeated. The judge ruled in my favor. I was awarded full ownership of the house, and the court ordered her to pay back a significant portion of the savings she tried to claim. She was furious, screaming and calling me controlling and jealous, but I just sat there calm and relieved. I knew I'd fought hard for this. I'd won back my life, my house, my savings, and my dignity. Lisa left the courtroom in tears, still trying to spin her story, but it didn't matter anymore. I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. All the lies, the manipulations, the betrayals, they were finally out in the open, and I'd come out on top. I knew she'd try to appeal or find some way to get her way, but I was prepared for that. I'd already taken steps to protect myself, and I wasn't going to let her ruin me again. In the end, I learned a lot from this nightmare. I learned that trust is fragile and that people can hide who they really are until it's too late. I learned that greed and ego can push someone to betray everything they once claimed to cherish. And I learned that sometimes, the only way to deal with a bitchy, manipulative liar is to fight hard and never give up. I'll never forget the pain of betrayal, but I also know I'm stronger now. I've rebuilt my life from the ground up, and I've come out better for it. Lisa's gone, and I'm finally free. This experience has taught me to be more cautious, more guarded, but also more determined. If you're ever in a similar situation, remember, don't be afraid to stand your ground, gather your evidence, and fight for what's rightfully yours. Because in the end, the truth always comes out and justice will prevail.